Japan has one of the lowest obesity rates in the developed world, yet many Japanese adults eat rice every day. Many don't count calories. Many don't follow strict diets. So, what are they doing differently? Researchers have spent years studying this question, and the answer isn't a special food. It's 5 surprisingly ordinary habits that influence hunger, stress hormones, sleep, movement, and fat storage every single day. The last one may be the simplest weight loss principle ever discovered. Most people wake up and reach straight for coffee, but after 7 or 8 hours without water, the body is already mildly dehydrated. Blood volume is lower. Fluids have been lost through breathing and during sleep. And cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, is naturally rising as part of the wake-up process. For some people, adding caffeine on top of that cortisol spike can amplify the stress response before the day has even started. This is where many Japanese households do something different. Water comes first. Sometimes warm, sometimes with lemon. Nothing complicated. Here's why that matters. Research consistently shows that the brain struggles to separate the signal for thirst from the signal for hunger. When the body is dehydrated, it can quietly drive calorie intake higher without a person realizing it. A glass of water won't burn fat directly, but it helps the body function the way it's supposed to before stimulation begins. And that sets up the second habit. Many Japanese adults, particularly older generations, walk outside in the morning, and modern science has found something important about that. The body runs on an internal clock called the circadian rhythm. That rhythm controls sleep, hunger, energy output, and hormone release. Morning sunlight is one of the strongest signals for keeping that clock calibrated correctly. But here's the part most people miss. The benefit of morning sunlight isn't really about the morning at all. It's about what happens that night. When the circadian rhythm is properly set, sleep quality improves. And research has repeatedly linked poor sleep to higher levels of visceral fat, the deep belly fat that wraps around internal organs. Disrupted sleep raises appetite hormones, increases cravings for calorie-dense food, and makes the body more likely to store energy as fat rather than burn it. A few minutes outside in the morning is, in a real biological sense, a sleep intervention. And a sleep intervention is a fat storage intervention. The third habit surprises a lot of people. Japan has a long history of tea culture, and many traditional tea drinkers consume caffeine later in the morning, rather than immediately upon waking. That timing turns out to matter. When you first wake up, cortisol is naturally high, and the brain is clearing a chemical called adenosine, the compound that builds up during wakefulness and drives sleep pressure. When caffeine enters the system during that window, it may override the body's own wake-up process rather than working with it. Delaying caffeine by even 45 minutes to an hour allows cortisol to peak and begin declining naturally. For many people, the result is steadier energy through the afternoon, fewer crashes, and fewer of the sugar cravings that tend to follow those crashes. Because when energy drops, the body doesn't ask for broccoli, it asks for fast carbohydrates. And repeated spikes and crashes in blood sugar are, over months and years, one of the most consistent drivers of belly fat accumulation. But there's a habit that affects total daily calorie burn even more directly than any of these. In Japan, movement is built into the structure of everyday life. Walking to train stations, walking between destinations, walking after meals. In many Western countries, exercise is treated as a separate event, something that happens for an hour, then stops. Japan tends to distribute movement throughout the entire day instead. Researchers call the calories burned through this kind of low-intensity daily activity NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Studies show that NEAT can vary by 300 to 500 calories per day between individuals with similar body types. Over a year, that difference can equal tens of thousands of calories without a single gym session. And unlike intense workouts, walking places almost no stress on the body. It improves insulin sensitivity, supports digestion, helps regulate blood sugar after meals, and quietly adds up to a calorie deficit that never feels like deprivation. And now we get to the habit researchers believe may explain more about Japan's waistlines than any of the others. Not exercise, not walking, not caffeine. Just one simple rule followed at nearly every meal. There's an old principle from Okinawa, a region in Japan historically noted for both low obesity rates and unusual longevity, called hara hachibu. It translates simply as, eat until you are 80% full, not stuffed, not uncomfortable, just satisfied. This is where it becomes counterintuitive. The stomach sends fullness signals to the brain, but those signals travel on a delay. Research suggests it takes roughly 15 to 20 minutes for the brain to register that the body has had enough food. By then, most people have already eaten past the point of need. Hara Hachibu creates a deliberate stop before that point is reached. Researchers who studied Okinawan populations for decades consistently documented calorie intake significantly below Western averages, not through restriction, but through this built-in behavioral pause. The practice isn't about eating less food, it's about stopping at a different moment. And that distinction matters, because restriction creates tension and eventually fails. Stopping slightly early, over and over, simply becomes how a person eats. So what does this actually mean? None of these 5 habits are dramatic. There's no supplement, no fasting protocol, no banned food. What they share is that they all work on the same underlying systems: hydration, circadian rhythm, stress hormones, movement, and calorie regulation consistently, every single day. Biology responds to repetition more than it responds to intensity. A person who walks every day, stops eating before they're full, and sleeps well most nights is creating thousands of small signals that tell the body it doesn't need to store excess energy. That's not a short-term intervention. That's an environment. Belly fat doesn't appear from one bad meal, and the habits that reduce it don't work through one dramatic change. They work because they shift the daily conditions the body lives in. And the body, given better conditions, tends to move toward better outcomes.